transition from school to adulthood is a pivotal time in any person's life. And as Vivek has shared, employment supports truly make a difference. As we think about what it takes for people to thrive beyond just those early transitions, housing becomes just as essential as employment. Our next legislative priority is to maintain access to safe, accessible, and affordable housing with wraparound services. Across Washington, nearly 37,000 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities face housing insecurity. In King County, many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities experience homelessness or live in unstable situations due to lack of accessible and affordable options. King County calls on the legislature to continue investing in affordable housing, including flexible state investments in operations, supportive services, repairs to existing homes, and to grow the workforce that provides the support that people need to live independently. Housing stability isn't just about a roof over someone's head. It's about dignity and safety and creating a true sense of belonging in the community. Now we'll hear from our next speaker, LaShayla Jones, who will share about the importance of accessible housing for families with disabilities.
Good evening, legislators, honored guests, and community members. My name is LaShayla Jones, and I live in Legislative District 32. I am a mother of 2 children with autism. They are 5 and 6 years old. Tonight I am here to discuss the importance of accessible and ADA-compliant housing for families with disabilities. Last year, my children and I experienced homelessness. We lived in our car, tried to go to a shelter, but we were asked to leave because my son made loud noises due to his autism. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. Finally, I worked with an organization who advocated for me, and I was able to get subsidized housing. I was so happy. After everything we went through, my kids and I finally had permanent housing and a chance to feel safe. On my application, I clearly stated that both of my children have autism, and we needed an ADA accessible unit because of their behavioral and safety needs. I assumed we would be placed in the correct unit, but the apartment we were giving is not accessible and not safe for my children. My kids have fallen multiple times on the stairs. The windows are not secure for children with sensory or behavioral needs. Even after recording this many times, we have not moved. Accessible units are very hard to find and more are needed. Yes, families like mine need housing, but we also need the right kind of housing. Housing that is accessible, housing that accommodates disabilities, housing that keeps our children safe. It is important to me when laws are passed, our housing programs are funded, that ADA units and disability accommodations are required and enforced, especially for families with children with autism and developmental disabilities. Our safety and our stability depend on it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, LaShayla, for sharing your story and for sharing your experiences with us here today. True access to care requires that everyone can find, understand, and use the services designed to support them. That's why King County's next legislative priority to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is to invest in culturally rooted and linguistically responsive services. So supporting all people, no matter what language they speak or where they come from, to access the services they need. In King County, over a quarter of residents speak a language other than English at home. For families navigating disability systems, this can create barriers that no one should have to face alone. King County is asking the legislature to maintain and strengthen interpretation, translation, and cultural navigation services, and to protect the rights of immigrant and refugee communities to access them. When we make our systems more inclusive for multilingual and multicultural families, we make them stronger for everyone. Our next story from Saba Elmi brings this to life.
större vidden av hej att vi vara svenskar och det. Att man nog fattar att hemma.
My name is Sabah Elmi. I greet everyone here tonight, and I thank you for listening to my story. The interpreter next to me will read my story for you. Sabah Elmi. Language Access Services. Good evening, legislators, honored guests, and community members. My name is Sabah Elmi. I live in District 11. I am the mother of 7-year-old son, Hamza Aiden, who has autism. I'm here tonight to talk about why culturally rooted and language-responsive services are life-changing for immigrant families like mine. For a long time, I struggled to understand the system that were supposed to help my son. I didn't know how to ask for developmental disability community services. This used to be called ADA, Applied Behavior Analysis, ABA, or Individual Education Plan, IEP services. I didn't always understand what the professionals were telling me. English is not my first language. The paperwork, the meetings, felt overwhelming. Another parent referred me to an organization that helped me, and that's when things finally changed. For the first time, I had support from someone who understood my culture and my language. My cultural broker helped me understand my son's services, taught me how to schedule and request an interpreter, and helped me learn how to speak up in meetings. They bridged the gap between me and the professionals and helped me understand my son's needs so he could get the support he deserves. Families like mine want to advocate for our children, but without interpretation, translation, and cultural navigation, we are left behind. Our children need services, not because we don't care, but because the systems are not accessible. Service providers cannot do this alone. They need more funding and resources to offer culturally rooted and linguistically responsive support, especially for BIPOC immigrant families raising children with disabilities. When you make decisions, please remember my story and remember that language access is equal access for our children. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Saba, for sharing your experiences. Language access is equal access for all of us. The final legislative priority that we're sharing with you tonight is to preserve and strengthen behavioral health crisis services and treatment for all, including people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Too often, children, youth, and adults with both developmental disabilities and behavioral health needs face long hospital stays or repeated emergency room visits because there aren't enough community-based supports to meet the need. King County is asking the legislature to invest in the behavioral health workforce, including training and retaining providers who understand the unique needs of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. These investments will reduce crises, keep families together, and create stronger, more connected communities. Now we'll hear from our next speaker.
Good evening, legislators, honored guests, and my fellow community members. My name is Mahad here, and I'm speaking on behalf of Felice Hassan, who couldn't be here tonight, and she resides in Legislative District number 37. Phyllis is the mother of her 23-year-old son, Mohammed, who has autism. Tonight, I'm here to speak about behavioral health services for individuals with autism. Behavioral health is extremely important to me because my son began experiencing serious behavioral health challenges when he was about 20 years old, right after COVID, when he returned to the school system. During one crisis after the other, he had to be taken to the emergency room and stayed there for a couple of weeks. We were told there were no available beds in the psychiatric unit. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Psychiatric unit. There you go. At that time, I learned something very, very painful. Many of the professionals who were supposed to help us blamed his autism instead of looking at his behavioral health and mental health needs. There was no understanding of the intersection between autism and behavioral health. There was very little support for us as a family. Today, we are still facing the same challenges. Behavioral health services for people with autism are extremely limited. Many professionals still say it's just the autism instead of providing the real mental health care. This is not acceptable. Because of these untreated behavioral health needs, my son cannot get a job. He cannot access meaningful programs. He stays home, and his life and our life has been on hold for years. Families like mine are left to struggle alone. We urgently need behavioral health professionals who understand autism. We need crisis supports. We need services that do not blame our children, but actually help them. When you are making decisions, please remember my story and remember that behavioral health supports for individuals with autism are essential for their safety, their dignity, and their future. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mahad, for sharing Phyllis's story. Together, these 6 priorities reflect a shared vision. Communities where people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and delays and their families can thrive with dignity, connection, and opportunity. Thank you to all of our speakers for sharing your important stories tonight. And now I'd like to turn the program back over to Gladys and Anya.